Every person on earth has a story, a unique story. Stories with joy and happiness, struggles and failures, and the crazy twists and turns. This is real life. Picture this. One episode, we're sitting down with Jared Folsom, a man who turned his life around from a stint in prison to becoming a millionaire. Another time, we're hearing from a 28-year-old cancer survivor who's conquered childhood adversity. These are the stories that resonate, tales of triumph over adversity, and insights that can inspire us all. Our passion is simple, to enrich lives and spark that fire within you to take that next step in your personal growth. We believe in the power of real stories to create genuine inspiration. Welcome to Real Life with Patrick Clark.
Well, hi there, everybody. My name's Patrick Clark, and welcome to the first podcast of the Real Life podcast. I'm excited to do this. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, several years actually, and gone through a variety of different names that I had in mind. In fact, you can still hear I have a little bit of a cold left, but hey, the show must go on, right? One of the things I'm going to talk about in today's podcast is kind of getting through some of the things that life throws at us, which a small cold is not that big of a deal, but, you got to keep going. So I'll give you a little bit of background on kind of how this all kind of came together. And it all started with me wanting to contribute something that, just bringing different aspects of life to people in different ways, and having seen people change, having changed myself a lot of times. I've had to recreate myself quite a few times, and I thought, well, I know that I'm not the only one that's had to do this. I know that. So, what are the different ways that other people have done that? And so I have quite a few guests already lined up to record some podcasts, and I can't wait to share those guests with you. And some of them might surprise you. And, I could bring in celebrity podcasters, which I guess as this thing grows, maybe I will. But I really wanted to focus on people that don't have the notoriety online or the fame online that a lot of other people do. That's not what this podcast is all about. I mean, if it gets to the point where, it grows and there's a lot of, celebrity people contributing to the Real Life podcast, talking about real life and their real life, I'm cool with that. But if it doesn't, then that's just not the way it goes. But enough about the future. Let's talk about today, and let's talk about the past. For those of you that know me, that have been, more or less following me on social media, privately and somewhat publicly, you know that the last year, 2023, which is, this is one of the last days of 2023 actually that we're doing this. It's been a rough year, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about this year here in a minute, but I want to kind of go back into my past to help you understand the more recent past, and then kind of how we're approaching the future. So I was born and raised actually back in my hometown where I'm shooting this, in Flagstaff, Arizona. We moved a lot, lived in 5 different cities, one of those being Flagstaff, and we're excited to be back here in Flagstaff and raising our 5 kids. And the journey from here and back here is pretty interesting. Now, I've had 5 children in 5 cities with the same woman. I always put a nice little pause there to make everybody laugh. But we've traveled a bit, and each time we've moved, there's been some sort of recreation that I've had to do. And each recreation, each manifestation of recreation has come with its hurdles and its successes and its failures. And one of those recreations was when I toured, played fiddle for a guy named Darius Rucker for a long time, and a lot of other people as well. Darius is kind of my claim to fame. And when Jenny and I decided to leave Nashville, I got an opportunity to go work for Eastman Music Company. And they're an instrument company that I had been a clinician for before, during, and after my employment with them. But they used to hire me when I was on the road, and I would go around and play violin or fiddle or conduct orchestras or do master classes or whatever was needed in that clinic at that time. It was pretty fun. It was always very interesting. No two clinics were the same. I didn't have a set agenda that I always did. So that was always fun and creative. But when I started working for Eastman Music Company, I realized that I wasn't done with music yet. And so there was always this pull of, music being the bigger priority. And it got in the way of me doing my job, I think, at times. And partly because I had been offered a job with Alan Jackson through a guy named Brad Paisley and his band leader, Kendall Marcy. And they said, hey, this is, we're recommending it to you. And my wife didn't want to be in Nashville anymore. And at that moment, I years before, when I was like 14 or 15 or something like that, I was sitting on the school bus and I had said, career be damned. I will be the best father and husband I can possibly be, no matter what. And that comes from my dad having not been around very much. My dad, kind of messed with me a lot and emotionally, not necessarily intentionally. It was kind of a spiteful guy at times. And my parents got divorced when I was 4. And, whenever he got mad, he wouldn't show up. And so I was kind of sick of all that nonsense. And I said, you know what? There's nothing more important than family. There's nothing more important than being a father and a husband. And in that moment, when I got the call about the Alan Jackson gig, it was kind of like, I don't know if Jenny will hang around if I take the gig. And as much as I wanted to do the gig, Jenny and Noah at the time was our first kid. We only had him at the time. They were more important. So I was already working for Eastman. We were kind of already going down that line. So we moved out to California. We lived there for about a year. Didn't work out. Just not the right fit for me. So I made some calls and I got a job offer to go play for, to go teach for Nevada School of the Arts in Las Vegas. And I was like, Las Vegas, yeah, really? Am I really considering this? And at that point, I had a stigma around the Las Vegas musicians scene, music scene, not musicians themselves. They were actually amazing people. And ironically enough, that's where I did most of my growing as a player. So you're like, well, hold on. You played for Darius Rucker and all these big stars, and you did most of your growing after you got out of that big limelight. Yes, that's the case. Now, while I was in Vegas, I did play a lot of big shows. We were on the Grammys and did a bunch of orchestra stuff and had a lot of fun with that. But as a musician, I was weak on my classical stuff. I mean, I kept it up well enough to be able to play, but not play it at the level that a lot of the classical musicians. It was just a stylistic difference that I hadn't really kept up on enough to really just go in and nail it. And by the time that I had left, which was 4 years later, I was really, really solid. I left Las Vegas going, yeah, I got the hang of this. Which is weird because I had the hang of the fiddling, but I never felt like I was solid. And that's where a lot of the recreating of myself really happened. So if you kind of look back at that, I was playing with all these big people, touring the country and the world, doing a lot of really cool things. I kind of had a little bit of imposter syndrome going on because I didn't feel like I was as good as I could be or as I should have been to have that role. And I look back at it, and most of it came from fear of judgment, right? I wasn't comfortable with myself and who I was And honestly, I was drawing my identity from my playing. So if I had a bad show, like I was not as good a human being as I was if I had a good show. And I mean, that is terrible. But that's the way I thought. And at the very end of my run with Darius, I had some run-ins with a band member in particular who had some power over me. And I had my own weaknesses and my own things that I was kind of dealing with and going through and handling moderately maturely, if I'm going to be honest. But I definitely was not handled well from some of the folks that had leadership over me or should have been leading me instead of doing the things that they did. But I got miserable. It was just terrible, and I began to become guarded. And so then I moved to Eastman, and again, there I wasn't protected either, as much as I thought I would have been, and things didn't work out. And so I kind of came out of those two situations where, wasn't a real secure person with who I was. Going into a town, I'm like, man, am I really going to Vegas? Am I really doing this? And I'm going to recreate myself again. And I get to Vegas and I meet Shakeh Gukasian and Mary Straub. And both of those ladies took that caged, hardened ego a little bit, and they softened it. And I'll never forget what Mary did. And she was so good about, like, she knew what she knew, but she was also very open to other ideas for teaching. And so I did a lot of private lessons, and I'll never forget, I'd been there about a year, and one of the requirements of me being there for a year was that I presented on my teaching. That was kind of my assessment of my employment, because I was given a grant for my salary for that first year while I grew my studio. And I had actually changed the way I taught, and I justified it. And I will never forget Mary going, "That's brilliant. I'm stealing that." And she had done a couple things like that before, but she says, "Yeah, I love that. I'm going to start using that." And I was like, "You've been teaching longer than I've been alive. Like, really? That's cool." And so what I learned from that was that you could be a leader without coming down on somebody. And I knew that, but she kind of showed me how. And she gave me the grace to heal. She gave me the grace to, fail in a lot of ways. But she would bring me over. She taught me how she taught. And she didn't charge me anything. So I got like a master's degree for free. And I kind of got paid for it, actually. But man, talk about the best situation in one of the places where I had actually been like, I can't believe I'm doing this. And I grieved giving up the Alan Jackson job, which I kind of resented Jenny for a while about that. And that was the immature part of me. Even though I knew I made the right decision, once I got to Eastman and I realized what the gig was, I was like, I should never have taken this job. And now looking back, I disagree. Everything happened the way it should have. And I've had to recreate myself through all of these different avenues and different life changes. And each one of them set the stage to let go of my pride and my ego. But there's been a lot of work that still needed to be done. Well, fast forward to about 5.5 years ago, actually about 6 years ago, Jenny and I find out we're going to have another baby. This is number 4 of 5. And I go, well, I can't keep I'm teaching. By this time we'd moved to Phoenix, teaching at Basis, loving teaching orchestra, gigging a bunch, doing music full time, right? I'm not playing for the big guys and the big performers, but I'm enjoying my life a lot. And I look at the bank account. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way I can raise 4 kids with a musician's money. And I'm working my tail off, you know. And so I go, well, how do I change this? And so, ironically, when we sold our house in Las Vegas, we our realtor said, "Have you ever thought about real estate?" Because I really enjoyed the process of learning about it, and of course my mom's a realtor, and I was like, "Nah, I'm a musician. I'm a teacher. Yeah, I'm good, thanks." Well, a year later, guess who signs up for real estate school? And I vetted the position, I vetted the career pretty heavily and was like, is this really where I want to be? Because what I wanted to do was have an impact. I get a thrill off of helping people get through some of the mental minutia of not understanding how to play or, you know, whatever. And that's why teaching was such a love of mine. It still is. And so when I kind of realized that, you know, I could have an impact on people's lives and I could still do my music, I could still teach, I could still do a lot of these other things, I was like, all right, I'm going to give this a shot. And that recreation of me, I could not have done that. You know, 5 years before that, I was too wrapped up in my identity coming from what I did rather than coming from God. And I still struggle with that because I still try to control things. And I'm not here to preach about God or anything like that. I don't want this podcast to turn into a place to preach, but I'm not going to hide my faith. And even sometimes the lack thereof. And that's going to be kind of the very tail end of this podcast. And so as I recreated myself as a realtor, I actually tried to kind of get people to forget that I was a musician, which was so contrary to the way I had always done everything. I needed everybody to know I was a musician. I needed gigs. I needed blah, blah, blah. And I was always a hustler. I was always sort of an entrepreneur in the music world. And you know, you get to this point where you're like, well, that's just not going to work, and you've got to put that away because you've got 4 kids to take care of. And we still wanted to get back to Flagstaff. So I had left Las Vegas after 4 years, 4 wonderful years of being there, because it just wasn't a place where we wanted to raise our kids. It's just simple. No judgment against all of my friends and family that are still there raising your families. It just was not the right fit for us. So we moved to Phoenix. I got that job at Basis, and found out we were going to have number 4, and all of a sudden here I am doing real estate. Well, Jenny's on bed rest, and I'm trying to figure this out. Well, I'll pause right there in the story, and I'm going to look back at everything that I did. When I moved to Las Vegas, one of the other things that I did is I started a website and I had written a book called Fiddling the Basics and Beyond. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to try to teach this curriculum online. And so I had video people, I had cameras, and I had all of these setbacks, and I was cutting this video, and I was doing this, and I learned so much about online, search engine optimization and video, which is what we're doing right here. I learned so much, but it just didn't work out. I burned up a lot of my savings trying to get this thing going. It didn't work, so I had to go back to work, and it was just one of those things where from there we kind of set ourselves back financially, and it was always kind of just trying to catch up. And so here we are, looking back at all of that, looking back at the process that I went through, trying to more or less let my ego die, right? Die to myself in a way, and really let God take control. And I can tell you that the video thing was not blessed at that time. But what I learned along the way, what I learned about being humble, and what Mary Straub taught me, what I learned from the video editing stuff, what I learned from the failures and the successes, even with my the successes that I had and the failures, which are far more than the successes, have brought me to a point where I can do this podcast. And that moment when I had made the switch into real estate and I said, man, I really want to find a way to contribute. This is that moment. Today, this first podcast is that moment. And that segues into kind of what's going on in my life. I now have 5 children. I've moved back to Flagstaff. I'm still selling real estate. I still play music. And, from a career standpoint, everything's pretty amazing. I've learned a lot. I mean, real estate has totally shifted my mindset on so many things, and my ability to recreate myself as a musician in all the different places that we moved, and just always being able to kind of land on my feet and grow. All of that gritty nature of mine has really paid off, because when I went into real estate, I had no freaking idea what I was doing. But I knew how to talk to people, and I cared about people, and those two things made me a decent realtor. Now I manage for Berkshire Hathaway. I manage an office in Sedona, and then I manage the Flagstaff territory. I still sell, I still play. So from those growth perspectives, everything was amazing. But then, of course, in 2022, we had some pretty big setbacks as well. I lost my dad. That brought up a lot. But then in February, I began to feel a bit of a financial unraveling as my truck began to give me problems. And then right after that, my son, Noah, and you have to forgive me, this is hard to talk about. My son just developed what we believe to be long COVID. It's as far as we can tell. I mean, people are like, he's got long COVID POTS, P-O-T-S, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And my faith and my strength has been challenged like never before. And I don't, like, Noah he's improved, but he still is not at a place where he can go play soccer like he used to. He'd been off the ball 5 years. He was making great progress. He was getting alternate on the tournament team. That kid, and even last night on the way back from the swimming pool, which is where he does the best right now for just getting his blood flow and getting, feeling halfway normal. He's like, gosh, Dad, I miss soccer. And I'm like, yeah, buddy, I miss watching you play. Sorry, guys. So, the grit that I had, used to get to my career places now had to be shifted into getting through the emotional challenges of watching your child suffer for months and months and months, and nobody has answers. Nobody really still has any definitive answers, and it's just kind of this ambiguous, how do we get Noah at right now just to a place where he can survive, and live a semi-normal life. I would love to see him get back on the soccer field, and that's our goal. That's his goal. He said, Dad, I want to play collegiate soccer. It's like, okay, I'm after that. But there's also the like, okay, how do I get him there? How do I get him here to these places first? At the same time, I have a daughter that's struggling massively with some stomach stuff and has for years. And I feel like the last year, I've had to really evaluate not just my core values, but who I am and why I do certain things. And this is kind of my message to you that I'd like you to take away from the podcast today. You probably have habits that you need to fix. And you may get to the point where it is so painful you finally fix it. That's what's happened to me. There's been things in my marriage that this challenge of my son and my daughter and these things have brought to the surface. And basically, we've had to face down the barrel of this loaded proverbial gun of you know, relationship dissolving, and Jenny and I are not on the same page, and, you know, we're not on the same page emotionally, we're not on the same page from communication, we're not on the same page financially. And I have massive ownership in those things. And, you know, I guess the big thing that I have learned is, you know, God's got a plan, but it's not mine. And so much of my life, I've been trying to kind of run my own life, which obviously you need to run your life, right? But you control the controllables. Troy Ryerson says that a lot. Control the controllables. And, you know, what are the controllables? Me. I'm the only one that I can control. I have to control my emotions. I have to control my behavior. I have to control my behavior through my emotions, right? You know, as Noah has suffered, I have suffered immensely. And, you know, I feel like I've done 10 years of life in the last year or two. And I guess what I have to share with you about all of that is, I guess maybe a question. Why wait to make the changes that you need to make? Why do you ignore the things that you need to change? Because I'm telling you, the pain of not changing them, and the hardship and the struggle of not changing them, when you know you need to, that pain and that suffering is far, far, far worse than you can ever imagine. And it's far worse than the temporary satisfaction you get from like putting it off for now. Oh, I'll do it later. I'll handle that later. Like, do the hard stuff now. Do it now. Because then you'll get to the point like I have where you are doing all of the hard all at the same time. And you're doing all the hard all at the same time, and it's a lot harder now than it would have been if I would have done the hard earlier. And that's my real life. Look, I'm very successful in a lot of different ways, but I failed a lot, and I hope that sharing today with you kind of my history and some of the things that I've done. And, you know, a lot of people I think see me as a pretty successful guy, and that's fine, but I'm still failing a lot. And I'm going to fix those things. I am fixing those things. And I want to challenge you to do the same. This podcast is not about seeing perfect people and thinking that that's real. Everybody's struggling. Everybody's doing something they shouldn't be doing. Everybody's like, every single person on this planet is broken. And my faith has been challenged. I've been mad at God. I've stepped away from him. I mean, I still have my belief. I still have my faith, but I'm just like, man, like, why do you do this? Like, why kids? Why children? I mean, I get adults. That's you know, but it's not my place to know. And through all of this, God has grown me and forced me to see my failures. And so out of every negative situation I encounter, I try to find a positive. And I would encourage you to do the same. And the positive here is that I am now communicating better with my wife than I ever have before, even though there's massive challenges there. We've been married 17 years. And so there's this, restructuring of how we communicate. And it's not a smooth ride. It doesn't just fix itself. I will fail in my communication. She'll fail in hers. And then we've got to kind of get through that. But what we have done is we have gotten on the same page in a lot of different ways. And we've created safety for each other. and we've created safety for ourselves to fail and pick each other back up. And for whatever you are going through or whatever you may go through, try to find a way to make your struggles a positive, because you're going to have them, and try to keep yourself positive, make yourself stay positive is what I was thinking, through the hard stuff, because that will get you through. Control your controllables, and then understand that the rest of it's not up to you. And that's the hardest part, I think. But if you do that and you keep the faith, you may be listening to this and you're not a Christian, and that's okay. But I will tell you that my faith is about the only thing that I have really been able to lean into, even though I've had to push it away and wrongfully push it away. But just know that God is there, and the struggles are the lessons that you've needed to learn. And sometimes it doesn't feel like it's fair. You're never going to know why. Sometimes you're never going to know why. And the control freak that's in us, all of us humans, wants to know. And at some point, you'll have to find contentment in the fact that you just won't. But if you are committed to always growing, always getting better yourself, growing yourself, making yourself better, then I firmly believe that that will carry you. That and your commitment to, if you are a Christian, your commitment to your faith will carry you. Stay committed to growth. Stay committed to being truthful to who you are, truthful to others, and fixing your mistakes. And I think life will be pretty cool. I think that's about it for today. My next guest will surprise you. My next guest, or my first guest, actually, the next podcast, I should say, we are going to feature a man that has actually been to prison. And his story is pretty stinking amazing. And his change and pivots in life have I think been probably harder than some of the things I've gone through, to be honest. I mean, it's probably not even fair to compare, but this guy's been through some stuff, and his success after his trials is incredible, and I can't wait to share that with you. So stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you so much for being here for this first one, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you on the next podcast. Take care.